The Minnesota Wild are involved in a tight three-way battle for first place in the NHL Central Division. Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild is here to talk about the stretch drive and what the Wild have to do to clinch first place. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
Your Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Minnesota Wild, Seth Toupal. And Seth, quite an exciting time right now for the Minnesota Wild. 1 point separating the top three teams in the division, and right now it's the Wild holding on to first place.
Yeah, you figure that a team is going to go 5-1-2 after losing their best player, right? That's just what the Wild have done, and it's been fascinating to watch this team unfold as this season goes along, and I actually tweeted about it earlier today. So you have just this dreadful start to the season. You give up 20 goals in the first three games. You technically start the season 0-3-1. You lose Jonas Brodin for a healthy stretch of the season. And now you're playing without Kirill Kaprizov. And yet we are sitting here with the Wild in first place outright. A team that lost Kevin Fiala's productivity and has really struggled to score goals at points this season. And yet they just continue to find ways to get it done. They're 5-1-2 without Kirill. They're 14-1-5 in their last 19 games. And I think it's something like 32 out of the last 38 possible points they have been able to pick up. It's a team that has gotten some really good goaltending all season. They play very stingy defense. And you're starting to see some guys take over. Matt Boldy he is hot enough to be walking on the surface of the sun right now with what he has done. I think he had 6 goals in a 6-game stretch ever since Kirill went out of the lineup. He looks like a guy that really just kind of has taken over. That line that he's on with Marcus Johansson and Joel Eriksson Ek, they have all been sensational. You're getting scoring up and down the lineup. Ryan Reeves has 4 goals in the last 6 games. So it's a team that I think really used this opportunity to rise to the moment. And I don't know how many other teams throughout the league you could subtract your best player and the team doesn't miss a beat. Obviously, they would love to have him back, and the hope is that he'll be back sometime before the regular season ends to kind of get his legs back under him. But the beat just goes on for the Wild, and they've got higher aspirations than just first in the Central, because the thing that's different from last year, they scored a ton of goals last year, but didn't really do a lot else right. And now it's almost the exact opposite. Everything else that you need to win in the postseason, tough defense, good goaltending, good special teams, the Wild have that remedy this year. So that when you get to a postseason series, you're not worried about, well, geez, we can't stop giving up goals. Now you just got to try to find a way to score 1 or 2.
You talk about giving up goals. Got to ask you about Filip Gustavsson. I mean, a 2.01 goals against average and a .932 save percentage. What is this guy doing so well this year?
You know, I think it boils down to just his calm demeanor on the ice. And it is interesting because you have Marc-Andre Fleury, who is an active animated goalie out there. He is one that really is not shy about moving around in the crease. Gustafson really is kind of a stay-at-home goalie. And I think his tendency to react to what's going on as opposed to trying to anticipate what's coming is really a big reason as to why he's had the success that he has. And It's fascinating because at the beginning of the year, that was one of the biggest unknowns for this team is how is this goalie situation going to play out? You don't really know what you have in Gustafson after trading him for Cam Talbot, who was a pretty solid constant in net. You bring in Gustafson, you don't really know what you're getting, and the Wild have gotten nothing but excellent goalie play over the last 5 months.
Who do you think gets the nod once the Stanley Cup playoffs get underway?
I think you got to go with Gustafson because he's been just good the whole year. Marc-Andre Fleury has had some waves. He's had some stretches where he has not had as good of play in net, and he's had some stretches where he's been fantastic. And so I think you go with the more consistent, steadying presence in net. Even though you got a guy who's one of the more decorated goalies in NHL history, I still think you go with Gus and you just let him be that guy to rally around for this group once the postseason starts.
How important is winning the division for this team? And then secondarily, at least finishing second to get home ice advantage in that first round of the playoffs?
I think it's big. It also is a team that I think plays a very conducive style to winning on the road. You know, they play a ton of tight games and they're used to withstanding some really heavy pushes from opponents. So I think in the event that they do end up finishing third and have to go to, say, Colorado or Dallas, I think they would be able to compete in a series with those teams, being the road team. But just having that home element is, I think, so much bigger when you get to the postseason. The ability to play the chess game, utilize those last changes to really dictate kind of how you attack the opponent. I think that gets to be really big, being the home team and being able to, let's say, win the division and taking on that wild card team, say Winnipeg or Seattle, that plays a similar style to Minnesota, as opposed to having to try to run to keep up with Dallas and Colorado. I think that would be pretty preferable as well.
Any timetable for when you get Kaprizov back? I know you said hopefully before the end of the season, but there's about 9-10 games left. When do you think we're going to see him?
Well, we just had a recent update from Michael Russo that Kaprizov is not going to travel with the team to Vegas and Colorado. Hasn't really done any skating yet. So I would imagine his timetable is closer to the end of the season. However, trade deadline acquisition Gustav Nyquist, who was a guy that the Wild picked up to help out in the top six, he fully practiced with the team on their last practice day, which, if memory serves, was Friday. He practiced fully. Now, he was wearing a no-contact jersey, but practiced fully with the team. And so his timetable hopefully is setting up for maybe that final week of the regular season. But I would imagine Kirill will be somewhere around that timetable too.
All right, Seth, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can follow me on Twitter at Seth Toups, and also you can follow Locked On Wilds on every social media platform, as well as follow on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. Locked On Wild for all of them. You'll find everything that we have to offer as the first place Minnesota Wild push towards the end of the regular season.
Should be a very exciting stretch drive. Seth, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Well, then you've got to try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in amazing flavors like peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, churro, and my personal favorite, cookies and cream. And listen to these macros. Each bar averages just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but it packs a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now, you could still go to built.com and have a box delivered directly to your door. But if you want to go out and get a box immediately, you can now go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick one up in person. So again, that's built.com to have them delivered, or Walmart or Sam's Club to pick them up in person. Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. You can thank me later.